Your grandmother didn't need a YouTube tutorial to get dinner on the table. She didn't Google how to roast a chicken or watch 17 videos about browning meat. She just knew. Those skills came from actually doing the work, night after night, until they became second nature. Somewhere between then and now, we lost more than just recipes. We lost the techniques that made those recipes work. Tonight, we're looking at 7 forgotten 1970s cooking techniques that modern families ignore. Number 7, rendering fat. Open your grandmother's refrigerator in 1975, and you'd probably find a mason jar of bacon grease sitting right there next to the milk. Not hidden in the back, not apologized for, just there, ready to use. Rendering fat was so basic that nobody thought to write it down. You cooked bacon, you saved the fat. You roasted a chicken, you saved the fat. You trimmed a pork chop, you rendered the fat. That jar represented flavor, economy, and common sense, all rolled into one. The process couldn't have been simpler. Cook the bacon until crispy, pour the hot grease through a strainer into a jar, let it cool, put the lid on, stick it in the fridge. Done. That grease would keep for months and improve almost everything it touched. Eggs fried in bacon, grease tasted like eggs were supposed to taste. Potatoes roasted in chicken fat developed a crispy exterior that vegetable oil could never match. Beans cooked with a spoonful of saved pork fat had a depth of flavor that modern recipes chase with a dozen ingredients and still miss. The health panic of the 1980s killed fat rendering in most American homes. Butter became the enemy. Bacon grease was basically poison. Everyone switched to margarine and vegetable oil and congratulated themselves on being modern and health conscious. Funny how that worked out. Turns out those industrial seed oils weren't the miracle health food we were promised. And that jar of bacon grease sitting in Grandma's fridge? Not the villain after all. But even now, when people know better, they don't render fat. They pour bacon grease down the drain or into a can to throw away later. They buy expensive duck fat from specialty stores while throwing away chicken fat. Rendering fat meant you used the whole animal. It meant you created flavor for free. It meant dinner tasted better because you understood that fat carries flavor in a way nothing else can. Number 6, pressure canning. The pressure canner sitting in your grandmother's kitchen looked like something that might explode at any moment. Heavy gauge aluminum or steel, with a locking lid and a pressure gauge on top that hissed and rocked when things got going. Intimidating as hell, especially if you'd heard the stories about Aunt Margaret's canner that blew its gasket and sprayed green beans all over her ceiling. But that pressure canner meant your grandmother could put up everything from the garden in a single weekend and have food on the shelf all winter. Tomatoes, green beans, corn, carrots, beets, chicken stock, even whole chickens, all safely preserved without a freezer, without electricity, just sitting on a shelf in the basement. Water bath canning could handle high-acid foods like tomatoes and pickles, but for low-acid vegetables and meats, you needed pressure. The canner had to reach 240 degrees Fahrenheit to kill botulism spores. No shortcuts, no guessing. You followed the instructions exactly, or people got sick. Most women learned pressure canning from their mothers, who learned from their mothers. You learned to check the rubber gasket before every use. You learned how much water to add, how to arrange the jars so steam could circulate, how to listen for the pressure gauge to start rocking. You learned to process different foods for different times at different pressures. A batch of green beans might take 25 minutes at 10 pounds of pressure. Corn took an hour and a half. Chicken took 75 minutes for pints, 90 for quarts. You didn't guess. You looked it up in your Ball Blue book or your Kerr canning guide, and you did it exactly right. The work was hot and exhausting. You'd spend all day Saturday in August with the pressure canner going, the kitchen steaming, sweat running down your back, processing quart after quart of whatever came ripe from the garden. But come February, you'd go down to the basement and grab a jar of green beans that tasted like summer. Pressure canning faded for several reasons. Freezers got cheap enough that regular people could afford them. Supermarkets stayed open year-round with produce from California and Mexico. The younger generation looked at those pressure canners and thought, that looks dangerous and like a lot of work. They weren't wrong about the work part. But dangerous? Not if you followed instructions. Those canners had safety features. The real danger was thinking you could can green beans in a water bath or process meat at too low a pressure and kill your family with botulism. Today, pressure canning is having a small revival among homesteaders and preppers. But most people have never seen it done. They think canning means making jam in a water bath. They don't realize you can preserve an entire year's worth of vegetables and meat with equipment that costs less than a good knife. Number 5. Making stock from scratch. Every serious home cook in the 1970s kept a stock pot on the back burner or a bag in the freezer for vegetable scraps and bones. Making stock wasn't a special project. It was what you did with garbage. Roasted a chicken on Sunday? The carcass went into the stock pot with some celery, onion, carrot, and water. Simmered for 3 or 4 hours, strained, cooled, skimmed the fat, and you had quarts of rich chicken stock. Peeled carrots, trimmed celery, the scraps went in the freezer bag. When the bag got full, you made vegetable stock. The difference between homemade stock and the stuff in a can or box wasn't subtle. Homemade stock had body, it had flavor. When it cooled, it turned to jelly because of all the gelatin from the bones. Canned broth was basically salty water with a hint of chicken flavor. Making stock required no skill, just time and patience. Fill a pot with bones and scraps, cover with cold water, add aromatics, bring to a bare simmer, and leave it alone for hours. Don't boil it hard or the stock would turn cloudy. Don't skip the aromatics or it would taste flat. The best stock simmered overnight on the lowest possible heat. In the morning, you'd strain out the solids, let the stock cool, skim off the fat, and portion it into containers. Some went in the fridge for immediate use, the rest went in the freezer. That stock represented free food. The bones cost nothing. The vegetable scraps cost nothing. For basically no money and minimal effort, you created an ingredient that improved everything it touched. But making stock fell out of fashion because of convenience. Why simmer a pot for hours when you could buy a can of broth at the store? Sure, it didn't taste as good, but it saved time. Except it didn't really save time. It saved active time. But stock didn't need stirring, it needed ignoring. You could make stock while you did literally anything else. When cooking shows started telling people to make stock from scratch again in the 1990s, they treated it like advanced technique. But your grandmother, who never graduated high school, could make better stock than most culinary school graduates because she actually did it regularly. Number 4, deglazing the pan. This one's almost too simple to believe we forgot it. After you brown meat in a pan, don't throw away those crusty brown bits stuck to the bottom. Add liquid, scrape them up, and you've just made a sauce. Those brown bits, which fancy cooks call fond, contain concentrated flavor from the Maillard reaction. When you add wine, stock, or even water, and scrape them loose with a wooden spoon, they dissolve into the liquid and create an instant sauce with more flavor than anything you could buy in a jar. Every home cook in the 1970s knew this. Fry pork chops, deglaze the pan with a little water, and make gravy. Brown a pot roast, deglaze with red wine and beef stock for braising liquid. Sauté mushrooms, deglaze with cream for pasta sauce. The technique was so basic that recipes often didn't bother explaining it. They'd just say, deglaze the pan, and assume you knew what that meant. And if you cooked regularly, you did know. You'd seen your mother do it 1,000 times. Deglazing worked because those stuck-on bits were pure flavor. When meat browns, the proteins and sugars on its surface undergo chemical reactions that create hundreds of new flavor compounds. Those compounds are more concentrated and complex than anything in the raw meat. Scraping them up and incorporating them into a sauce captured all that flavor. The process took maybe 2 minutes. Pour in some liquid, turn up the heat, Scrape the bottom of the pan with a wooden spoon until the brown bits came loose, reduce the liquid slightly, season to taste. That's it. You just made a pan sauce that restaurants charge $20 extra for. But somewhere along the way, people stopped doing it. They'd cook chicken breasts in a pan, transfer them to a plate, and throw away the pan drippings without a second thought. All that flavor, straight down the drain. When you pointed out they could make sauce from those drippings, they'd look at you like you'd suggested something complicated. Make a sauce? That requires a recipe, special ingredients, culinary school, right? No. It requires wine, stock, or water, a wooden spoon, and 30 seconds of scraping. The reluctance to deglaze revealed how divorced modern cooking had become from actual technique. People could follow recipes, but they didn't understand what was happening in the pan. They didn't understand that cooking is chemistry and physics, and that those brown bits represented a chemical transformation worth capturing. Number 3, proper knife skills. Your grandmother could break down a whole chicken in about 90 seconds with a knife that you'd probably complain was too dull. She could peel and dice an onion faster than you could Google how to dice an onion. She could French a rack of lamb, bone a fish, and turn a cucumber into something resembling a flower without consulting a single YouTube video. These weren't special occasion skills. This was Tuesday before dinner. The chicken needed cutting up, the onion needed dicing, and she had things to do. So she did it efficiently, without drama, without treating it like some kind of performance. Knife skills in the 1970s meant understanding that a sharp knife was safer than a dull one because it did what you wanted instead of slipping and cutting you. It meant knowing which knife to use for which job. A paring knife for detail work, a chef's knife for chopping and slicing, a serrated knife for bread, and maybe a boning knife if you did a lot of meat work. It meant understanding that the knife does the cutting, not your hand. You don't push down hard. You draw the blade through whatever you're cutting, using the weight of the knife and the sharpness of the edge. Let the tool do the work. Women learned these skills by watching and doing. Mothers handed daughters a knife and a pile of potatoes and said, "Peel these." No lengthy explanations about hand position or claw grip. Just the expectation that you'd figure it out and keep all your fingers in the process. Through repetition, knife work became automatic. Your hands knew what to do without your brain getting involved. You could dice an onion while carrying on a conversation or mentally planning tomorrow's schedule. The knife was just an extension of your hand. This kind of unconscious competence made cooking faster and more enjoyable. You didn't dread chopping vegetables because chopping vegetables took about 30 seconds per vegetable instead of 5 minutes of careful conscious effort. Today, people watch elaborate knife skills videos and practice their brunoise and julienne like it's a martial art, which is fine, except their grandmother could turn out a more precise mirepoix in less time without knowing what a mirepoix was called. The real skill wasn't fancy knife work. The real skill was efficiency, born from repetition, doing it the same way every time until it became muscle memory, not treating every onion like a special snowflake that required perfect technique. And the real skill was maintaining your knives. A sharp knife made everything easier. Most home cooks in the 1970s could sharpen a knife on a steel or a whetstone well enough to keep it functional. They understood that a knife was a tool that needed maintenance, not a disposable piece of equipment. Number 2, braising tough cuts. Walk into a supermarket in 1975 and the meat counter looked different. You'd see chuck roasts, bottom round, brisket, pork shoulder, beef shanks. Tough cuts that required long, slow cooking. You'd also see reasonable prices because these cuts were considered inferior to steaks and chops. Your grandmother knew those tough cuts weren't inferior. They were different. But cook them right, and they were often more flavorful than expensive cuts because they came from hard-working muscles with more connective tissue and intramuscular fat. Braising was the standard technique. Brown the meat hard in a heavy pot to develop flavor. Remove the meat, sauté some aromatics in the fat, deglaze the pot, add the meat back with some liquid, cover, and cook low and slow until the connective tissue broke down into gelatin and the meat became fork tender. This could happen on the stovetop or in the oven. The key was maintaining a bare simmer, not a rolling boil. Too much heat and the meat would tighten up and dry out. You wanted small bubbles occasionally breaking the surface, a gentle transformation that took 3 or 4 hours. Pot roast was the classic example. Chuck roast, browned and braised with carrots, potatoes, and onions. The meat cooked until you could cut it with a fork, and the vegetables absorbed all those beefy flavors. Pork shoulder braised in sauerkraut and beer. Lamb shanks braised in red wine and tomatoes. Beef short ribs braised in stock and aromatics. These were sophisticated dishes that required understanding how heat, time, and moisture transformed tough meat. But braising faded as people got wealthier and busier. Why mess with a tough chuck roast when you could buy a tenderloin? Why spend 4 hours braising when you could grill a steak in 10 minutes? Now we're seeing braising come back, often marketed as comfort food or low and slow cooking. Which is funny because for most of human history, it was just called cooking the meat we could afford. Number 1. Adjusting recipes on the fly. Here's the thing about cooking in the 1970s. Recipes were guidelines, not laws. If the recipe called for mushrooms and you didn't have mushrooms, you used something else or left them out. If it said 2 cloves of garlic and you liked garlic, you used 4. The recipe was a starting point, not a script to be followed exactly, or the whole thing would fail. This flexibility came from understanding what different ingredients did. Flour thickens, acid brightens, fat carries flavor and creates richness, salt enhances, sugar balances. Once you understood those basic principles, you could adjust any recipe to work with what you had. Out of sour cream, use yogurt or buttermilk. Out of buttermilk, add vinegar to regular milk. Out of chicken stock, use vegetable stock and maybe add a little soy sauce for depth. No white wine for the recipe. Use white vermouth or chicken stock with a squeeze of lemon. This wasn't being clever or inventive. This was making dinner with what was in the house. Grocery stores weren't open 24 hours. You couldn't order missing ingredients on your phone and have them delivered in an hour. You worked with what you had. The ability to substitute and adjust separated good cooks from people who just followed recipes. Good cooks understood why ingredients were there and what they contributed. They could taste something and identify what it needed more of. They could look at a recipe and mentally adjust it before they even started cooking. They also understood timing flexibility. If the recipe said bake for 45 minutes, but the cake wasn't done, they kept baking. If it said simmer for 20 minutes, but the sauce was too thin, they kept simmering. The recipe's times were suggestions based on someone else's stove, oven, and ingredients. Your mileage would vary. This kind of cooking required confidence and experience. You had to trust your senses more than the printed page. Does it look done? Does it smell done? Does it feel done? Those questions mattered more than what the timer said. Modern cooking culture has moved in the opposite direction. Recipes are tested to the quarter teaspoon and timed to the minute. Cooks follow them exactly, afraid that any deviation will result in disaster, which creates people who can execute a recipe but can't actually cook. If the recipe calls for shallots and you only have onions, you're stuck. If it says cook for exactly 12 minutes, but your stove runs hot, you burn it. You can't adjust because you don't understand what the recipe is trying to accomplish or why certain ingredients are there. The irony is that this fear of deviation has made cooking harder, not easier. Instead of learning principles and techniques that work across thousands of dishes, people memorize specific recipes and panic when something goes wrong. Your grandmother learned differently. She learned that cooking was improvisation within a framework of basic techniques. The framework was solid, but the details were flexible. And that flexibility is what made her a better cook than most people with culinary degrees. These 7 techniques didn't disappear because they stopped working. They disappeared because we convinced ourselves that cooking should be easier, faster, and more convenient. We traded skill for speed, technique for shortcuts, and knowledge for recipes. But here's what we lost in that trade: flavor, economy, self-sufficiency, and the simple satisfaction of knowing what you're doing. Rendering fat takes no time and creates flavor you can't buy. Pressure canning preserves food without electricity. Making stock turns garbage into gold. Deglazing a pan makes sauce from nothing. Knife skills save time. Braising makes cheap cuts delicious. And adjusting recipes means you can actually cook instead of just following instructions. None of these techniques are difficult. They're just unfamiliar to people who grew up thinking cooking meant following recipes exactly or heating up prepared food. But they're worth learning, not because they're old-fashioned or nostalgic, but because they work. Maybe it's time to stop ignoring what our grandmothers knew. Maybe it's time to pull out that pressure canner, save that bacon grease, and make dinner from scratch without consulting the internet. Maybe it's time to remember that cooking is a skill, not a chore, and skills get better with practice. If you enjoyed this look back at forgotten cooking techniques, please like and subscribe to our channel for more practical food content. And if you still use any of these techniques or learned them from your grandmother, let us know in the comments below.